The little girl grabbed the crystal vase off the table and hurled it straight at the doctor's head. It shattered against the wall. Silence fell across the entire room. 9 years old, red-faced, tears streaming. Lena Whitmore stood in the center of the Whitmore mansion and screamed one word at everyone surrounding her. "Leave!" Nobody moved fast enough, so she picked up another vase. If you've ever loved someone and had no idea how to reach them, this story is for you. Subscribe to our channel. Follow this story all the way to the end, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. The first vase cost $4,000. Victoria Whitmore knew the exact price because she had purchased it herself during a business trip to Milan 3 years earlier, during a time when her life still made sense, when her husband was alive, when Lena still ran to the door every evening to greet her, when the mansion felt like a home instead of a beautifully decorated prison. The second vase cost $6,000. The doctor who almost caught it in the face was Dr. Raymond Holt, one of the top childhood behavioral specialists in the country. He had a waiting list of 18 months. He charged $400 per hour. He had written 2 books on childhood grief and trauma recovery. He lasted 11 minutes with Lena Whitmore before retreating into the hallway, adjusting his glasses, and saying very quietly to Victoria, "I think we need to explore residential treatment options." Victoria stared at him. "She is 9 years old." "Mrs. Whitmore, she is 9 years old and her father died 14 months ago." Victoria's voice did not crack. It never cracked. That was something people always remarked about her. The iron composure, the unshakable calm, the way she could sit across a negotiating table from men twice her size and never blink. "She is not a case file. She is not a residential treatment option. She is my daughter." Dr. Holt straightened his jacket. "I understand your feelings, but Lena is displaying increasingly aggressive behaviors that suggest she needs more structured intervention than weekly sessions can. Get out of my house." He blinked. "Excuse me. I said get out of my house." Victoria turned away from him. "Margaret will show you to the door." Margaret, the head housekeeper, appeared immediately from around the corner. She had clearly been listening. She had been with the Whitmore family for 11 years, and the expression on her face when she looked at Dr. Holt was the same expression she reserved for people who tracked mud across the marble floors. "This way, please," Margaret said. Dr. Holt left. Victoria stood alone in the hallway outside Lena's bedroom door. From behind the door came the sound of something else being thrown. Something soft this time, a pillow maybe. Then silence. Then a sound so small Victoria almost missed it. Her daughter crying. Not screaming, not raging, just crying. Victoria raised her hand to knock. She held it there for almost 30 seconds. Then she lowered it again and walked away down the hall. Because she did not know what to say. And Victoria Whitmore had built an empire on always knowing exactly what to say. The staff at Whitmore International described their CEO in 3 words: brilliant, decisive, untouchable. She had taken her late husband's struggling technology firm and transformed it into a multinational corporation worth $4.7 billion. She had negotiated with foreign governments. She had survived hostile takeover attempts. She had restructured failing companies while simultaneously managing her husband's 18-month illness without ever missing a single board meeting. People admired Victoria Whitmore with a kind of reverence usually reserved for historical figures. None of them knew that she went home every night to a child she had no idea how to love. Not because she didn't love her, because she loved her so much it paralyzed her. After James died, Lena stopped being the little girl who sat on Victoria's lap during morning coffee. She stopped asking questions about stars and butterflies and whether dogs could understand human language. She stopped leaving drawings on Victoria's desk. Those crayon portraits with enormous heads and tiny stick arms, and the word Mama written in wobbly capital letters along the bottom. She stopped being Lena. And Victoria had responded the way she responded to every crisis. She hired experts. She created a plan. She followed the plan with precision. It didn't work. Nothing worked. 3 therapists in 14 months. Dr. Patricia Chen, who specialized in pediatric grief. Dr. Michael Torres, who used art therapy and sand trays and carefully selected picture books about loss and healing. And now Dr. Holt, with his waiting list and his $400 hours and his residential treatment suggestions. Every single one of them had said some version of the same thing. She needs more time. She's resistant to the process. She needs to learn to trust. What none of them said, what none of them seemed able to say, was the one simple truth that Victoria was slowly beginning to suspect. The problem wasn't Lena. The problem was that nobody in her daughter's life actually knew how to stay. The Whitmore Foundation Charity Gala was scheduled for a Friday evening in October. Victoria almost canceled it. Her assistant Claire talked her out of it. The foundation has already committed to 7 nonprofit partners. The caterers have been contracted. The press has confirmed attendance. Canceling at this stage would cost... Fine, Victoria said. It stays. She did not say, I cannot leave Lena alone with the staff for an entire evening. She did not say, every time I walk out that door, I feel like I am abandoning her all over again. She said fine, and she meant it to end the conversation, and it did. What she arranged instead was a compromise. The gala was held not at an outside venue, but at the Whitmore Foundation headquarters building 7 minutes from the mansion. Lena would be brought over for the first hour only supervised by Margaret and returned home by 8 o'clock. The child psychologist on retainer. A new one, the 4th, had suggested that social exposure in structured familiar settings might help Lena gradually rebuild tolerance for public situations. That was the clinical language. What it meant in practice was, bring the child, keep her calm. Pray. Lena arrived in a white dress with small blue flowers that Margaret had clearly spent considerable effort convincing her to wear. Her dark hair was brushed. Her face was expressionless. She walked beside Margaret without touching her, maintaining exactly the kind of distance that said very clearly, I am here. I am not okay with being here. Do not test me. Victoria crossed the room to meet her. You look beautiful, she said. Lena said nothing. Are you hungry? They have those small sandwich things you... I'm not hungry. Okay. Victoria hesitated. Well, if you want to go find a quiet corner, that's... I know. And that was it. That was the conversation. 14 months of distance compressed into 6 words and a pair of eyes that refused to hold contact for more than half a second. Victoria watched her daughter walk away toward the far corner of the room. She turned back to her guests and smiled and shook hands and said all the right things. Inside, something she could not name was breaking very slowly. The crisis happened at 8:47. Lena was supposed to have already left. Margaret had tried to guide her toward the car at 8:15, then 8:30. Each attempt had been met with increasing resistance. Not screaming, not yet just stillness, the locked joints refusal of a child who had decided that movement was the enemy. Then, one of the foundation's major donors, a heavy-set man named Gerald Price, made the mistake of crouching down to Lena's level and saying in the exaggerated, over-cheerful voice that adults used with children they didn't understand, "Well, aren't you just the most grown-up little lady at this whole party?" Lena looked at him. "Don't touch me," she said. Gerald laughed. He thought she was joking. He reached out and patted her on the head. That was the mistake. What happened next took less than 4 seconds. Lena's hand snapped up and knocked his arm away. Then she grabbed the closest thing on the table beside her, a small decorative centerpiece glass, maybe 14 inches tall, and she raised it above her head. "Lena," Margaret said sharply. The centerpiece came down against the table with a crack that silenced the entire room. It didn't shatter. It bounced and rolled and crashed off the edge onto the floor, and the sound of it was enormous in the sudden quiet. Lena stood there with her hands shaking, and her chest heaving, and her eyes scanning the room like an animal that had just realized it was surrounded. People stared. Phones appeared. Security moved. 2 of the foundation's board members exchanged looks that Victoria caught from across the room and immediately recognized. Those looks said things that board members were too professional to say out loud. Things about image, about liability, about whether the CEO of Whitmore International could actually manage her own household. Victoria moved through the crowd. She was already calculating. Damage assessment, communication strategy, how to remove Lena quietly, how to address Gerald, how to neutralize the board member's concern before it crystallized into something more serious at the next meeting. She was already solving it. She was 10 feet away from her daughter when Lena looked at her. And what Victoria saw in Lena's eyes stopped her completely. Not rage, terror. The pure animal terror of a child who was watching everyone in the room decide what to do with her. Who understood on some deep wordless level that she was being assessed, managed, categorized, fixed, and who was screaming inside in the only language she had left. Victoria opened her mouth. She had no idea what to say. She was still standing there frozen when someone stepped past her. Not security. Not Margaret. Not any of the foundation board members, or the childhood specialist, or the publicist, or any of the dozens of credentialed, qualified, highly paid people in that room. A man in a gray uniform, who was carrying a mop bucket on wheels, which he had apparently been using to clean up something near the kitchen corridor before the noise stopped him. He was not tall or particularly striking. 40-ish, maybe a little younger. Dark circles under his eyes. A small plastic name tag on his chest that read Ethan. He walked toward Lena without hesitating. Security moved to intercept him. "Sir." "It's fine," he said. He didn't look at security. He kept his eyes on Lena. "It's fine." He stopped about 6 feet away from her. He did not crouch. He did not smile. He did not use the voice. He simply stopped and looked at her with an expression that was impossibly completely normal. Not alarmed. Not pitying, not calculating. He just looked like someone who had seen this before. Then he did something that made absolutely no sense. He sat down on the floor, right there in the middle of the Whitmore Foundation Gala, with 200 guests watching and phone cameras, recording and board members exchanging another round of those significant looks. Ethan Miller sat down on the marble floor, crossed his legs, and said nothing. A full 30 seconds passed. Lena stared at him. He didn't move. Her breathing was still ragged. Her hands were still shaking. But the centerpiece was on the floor, and she wasn't picking anything else up, and her eyes had shifted. She was not looking at him like a threat. She was looking at him like a question. Another 15 seconds passed. Then very quietly, Ethan made a sound. Not words. Not anything designed or therapeutic or intentional sounding. He just cried, softly. Just a few seconds of it. His face didn't crumple dramatically. His shoulders didn't heave. He just let it happen the way people cried when they weren't performing it for anyone, the way grief sometimes simply appeared without warning. The room was so quiet that people near the back were standing on their toes to see. Victoria could not breathe. Lena looked at the man on the floor. Her chin wobbled. "Why are you crying?" she said. Her voice was very small. Ethan wiped his face with the back of his hand. He took a breath. "Because you looked like you needed someone to." Lena stared at him. "That doesn't make sense," she said. "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." She looked around at the watching crowd. Her jaw tightened. "Everyone is looking at me." "Yeah." He didn't turn around to look at anyone else. "Do you want to go somewhere quieter?" A long pause. "Where?" "There's a room down that hall. I was cleaning it before. It's got a couch and some bad art on the walls and nobody in it." Another pause. Longer this time. "Is there food?" Ethan thought about it. "I have a granola bar in my pocket." Lena looked at him for a full 5 seconds. Then she walked toward him. Not toward Victoria. Not toward Margaret. Not toward any of the qualified professionals who had been studying her, assessing her, writing clinical notes about her for 14 months. She walked toward the janitor sitting on the floor, and she sat down beside him, right there in front of everyone. Victoria stood very still. Her security head appeared at her shoulder. "Do you want me to?" "No," she said. "Mrs. Whitmore, this is highly irregular." I said no. Her voice came out strange. Rough. Not the CEO voice. Something older. Leave them alone. Down on the floor. Ethan was talking quietly to Lena. Victoria couldn't hear the words from where she stood. She could only see her daughter's profile, the rigid set of her shoulders slowly, gradually loosening, the locked jaw relaxing by degrees. And after another minute, something she hadn't seen in 14 months. Lena nodded. Just a small nod. Agreement about something. Whatever he had said. She nodded. Victoria found him 20 minutes later in the side room alone. Lena had been carefully, peacefully guided out to the car by Margaret, who reported in a voice of barely suppressed astonishment that Lena had walked out without incident, had even said goodnight. Ethan was pushing his mop bucket back toward the service corridor when Victoria stepped in front of him. He stopped. "I need to understand what you did," she said. He looked at her steadily. "I didn't do anything. You sat on the floor of my charity gala and cried in front of 200 people. Yes. Why?" He was quiet for a moment. Because everybody in that room was standing above her. Every single person. Looking down at her, trying to figure out what to do with her. He paused. She didn't need someone to figure out what to do with her. She needed someone to get down to where she was. Victoria looked at him. "That's it. That's the whole explanation. That's most of it. What's the rest?" Another pause. "My daughter used to do the same thing," he said. "After her mother died. She'd rage and throw things and push everyone away. And I hired people to help, and they helped some, and the therapist helped some, and the books helped some. But the thing that actually worked, the thing that actually cracked it open, was the day I stopped standing in front of her trying to catch the pieces, and I just sat down and let her see that I was breaking too." Victoria was silent. "She's not angry," Ethan said. "She's terrified. I know she's terrified. Do you—" He said it without any challenge in his voice. Just a genuine question. "Because from what I could see tonight, everyone in that room, including you, everyone was trying to stop the behavior. Nobody was asking what was underneath it." The words landed somewhere in Victoria's chest and stayed there. She did not have an answer for him. He nodded once. "I should get back to work." He started to push the bucket past her. "Wait." He stopped. "Your name is Ethan. Ethan Miller. How long have you worked here?" "Coming up on 2 years. I've never noticed you before tonight." He almost smiled. "Most people don't." Victoria looked at him. She was already running the calculation. Already building the offer in her mind, the way she built every deal, structured specific, clear terms, clear expectations. "I want to hire you," she said. "To work with Lena." He blinked. "I'm a janitor." "You're the first person who's gotten through to her in over a year," she kept her voice even. "I don't particularly care about your job title." He was quiet. "I'll pay you well. Whatever your current salary is, I'll triple it. Your only responsibility would be—" "No." She stopped. "No." Victoria Whitmore could not recall the last time someone had said no to her with that particular quiet finality. "I'm not a therapist," he said. "I'm not a specialist. I don't have credentials. And if you pay me to be around your daughter, then the day the contract ends, I'm just another person who left when the arrangement stopped working." He shook his head. "That's the last thing she needs." Victoria stared at him. "Then what do you suggest?" she said. I thought about it. Genuinely thought about it with the same calm and the same directness he seemed to apply to everything. "I suggest you stop trying to solve her. She's suffering." "I know she is. But suffering isn't a problem with a solution. It's something a person moves through. And the only way she's going to move through it is if someone proves to her that they're not going to disappear when it gets hard." "Are you saying you'll stay?" "I'm saying—" He paused. "Let me think about it. Give me a few days. I'm not going to make you a promise about your daughter that I can't keep." Victoria held his gaze. In 14 months and 47 board meetings and several hundred negotiations, she had learned to read people. It was perhaps the most valuable skill she possessed. She could look at a person and assess within 60 seconds whether they were lying, uncertain, confident, afraid. Ethan Miller was none of those things. I was simply honest. "Take your time," she said. He nodded, picked up his bucket, and walked away down the corridor. Victoria stood alone in the side room with the bad art on the walls. And for the first time in 14 months, something very small and very fragile began to open somewhere in the middle of her chest. Not hope, not yet, but the possibility of hope, which for a woman who had stopped believing in possibility was everything. 3 days passed before Ethan called. Victoria was in the middle of a board meeting when her personal phone lit up with an unknown number. She never answered unknown numbers during board meetings. She had a rule about it the same way she had rules about everything structured, disciplined, non-negotiable. She excused herself from the room. "This is Victoria. It's Ethan Miller." A pause. "From the foundation. I know who you are. I've thought about it." She waited. She was standing in the hallway outside the boardroom with 12 executives on the other side of the glass wall, watching her through the window, and she did not care even slightly. "I'll do it," he said, "but not as an employee, and not for the money." "Then how?" "As someone who shows up 3 times a week. No contract, no title, no guarantee that it goes anywhere. If Lena decides she doesn't want me around, we stop. If I think I'm making things worse instead of better, we stop." He paused again. "And I need to meet her properly first. Not in a crisis. Just normally. Like a normal person meeting another normal person." Victoria thought about it for exactly 4 seconds. "When?" "Saturday morning works for me." "I'll arrange it." "One more thing." "Yes." "Don't tell her I'm coming to help her. Don't make it a thing. If she asks who I am, just tell her I'm someone you know." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "She'll figure it out." "Maybe." His voice was calm. "But let her figure it out on her own terms. That matters." Victoria looked back through the boardroom glass. 12 executives waiting on a merger discussion worth $300 million. "Saturday," she said. 9 o'clock. She went back into the meeting. She could not remember a single word that was said for the rest of the hour. Saturday arrived gray and cold, the kind of October morning that smelled like rain that hadn't happened yet. Ethan showed up 4 minutes early, which Victoria noted without saying anything. He was wearing a plain blue sweater and dark jeans, and he looked completely different without the gray uniform younger. Somehow, though, the dark circles under his eyes were the same. Lena was in the kitchen eating cereal and ignoring the world. Victoria walked in first. "Lena, I have a friend stopping by this morning." "I'm busy," Lena said. "You're eating cereal." "I'm busy eating cereal." Ethan appeared in the doorway behind Victoria. Lena looked up. Something moved across her face fast, almost too fast to track. Recognition. Wariness. And underneath both of those, something she worked very hard to keep invisible. Something that looked almost like relief. "You're the floor guy," she said. Ethan glanced down at himself. "I'm wearing different clothes." "You're still the floor guy." "Fair enough." He walked to the counter, opened the cabinet beside the refrigerator with the easy confidence of someone who either had no anxiety about strange kitchens or had already decided that anxiety wasn't useful and found a mug. He poured himself coffee. He did not ask permission. He did not make a big deal of it. He just existed in the space, normally. Lena watched him with the focused suspicion of a child who had learned that every adult who came into her life had an agenda. "Why are you here?" she said. "Your mom makes better coffee than I do." "That's not a real answer." "No," he agreed, sitting down across from her. Not next to her. Across with the full width of the kitchen table between them. "It's not." She stared at him. "Are you another therapist?" "Absolutely not." "Are you going to ask me how I feel about my dad?" "No." "Are you going to give me a workbook?" He looked genuinely baffled. "What kind of workbooks have they been giving you?" "The feelings kind." She said the word feelings the way most people said words like sewage or taxation. "They have cartoon faces on them. Happy face, sad face, angry face. Like I'm 4. That sounds terrible. It was terrible. She picked up her spoon. "The last one made me do breathing exercises." "Did they help?" She considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "Sometimes." But I wasn't going to tell him that. Something crossed Ethan's face. Not quite a smile. Something quieter. Yeah, I get that. Lena ate her cereal. Ethan drank his coffee. Victoria stood near the doorway and said absolutely nothing, because she understood somehow, in the deep instinctive way she understood things, that the worst possible thing she could do right now was speak. After a while, Lena said, "Do you have kids?" "One daughter. She's 11. "What's her name?" "Maya." "Does she live with you?" "She does." Lena was quiet for a moment. "Does she have a mom?" Ethan set his mug down. He didn't hesitate. He didn't give her the careful, cushioned, professionally worded answer that every adult in Lena's life had been trained to deliver. "No," he said. "She died 4 years ago." Lena went very still. "Car accident," she said. Her voice had changed. Lower. Careful. "Yeah. My dad had a heart attack. I know." "How do you know?" "Your mom told me." Lena looked at Victoria. Something complicated moved between them. Not anger, not warmth, just the complicated tectonic shifting of a relationship that had too many fault lines and not enough solid ground. Then she looked back at Ethan. "Does Maya still cry?" she asked. "Sometimes," he said. "Less than she used to, but sometimes." "Do you?" "Yeah." She looked at him steadily. "You cried at the party." "I did." "In front of everyone." "Yep." She seemed to be weighing something. "Weren't you embarrassed?" Ethan picked his mug back up. "I used to be," he said. "Then I figured out that being embarrassed about crying was less useful than just crying." Lena thought about this for a long moment. "That's a weird thing to figure out," she said finally. "Probably." She went back to her cereal, but she didn't ask him to leave. And in the doorway, Victoria Whitmore, CEO billionaire woman who had never once cried in a board meeting, pressed her fingers briefly against her mouth and turned away before either of them could see her face. The arrangement became real the following week. Not formal. Not structured. Not anything that looked like a program or a plan, because Ethan had been specific about that. No plans. Plans felt like ambushes to kids who'd been ambushed by grief. He came on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday mornings. He didn't bring workbooks or breathing exercise cards or any of the therapeutic tools that Lena had learned to identify and immediately distrust. He brought his ordinary self, which turned out to be exactly enough. He showed up and drank coffee, and sometimes sat in the garden while Lena drew things in a sketch pad she'd found in a drawer. He didn't ask to see the drawings. He didn't comment on them unless she showed him first. Twice in the first 2 weeks, she threw things. The first time, a hardcover book flung across the library, because Victoria had said something wrong at dinner the night before, and Lena had been holding the anger all morning. Ethan watched the book hit the wall and then looked at her and said, "Good arm." She blinked. "What?" "Seriously, that was a solid throw. What did the book do to you?" It was so completely unlike any response she had been trained to expect that the rage simply deflated. Like something with the air let out. She stood there for a second looking confused, and then to her own apparent horror started laughing, just briefly, just a small surprised sound. But it was real, and it was hers, and it was the first laugh anyone in that house had heard from her in over a year. The second incident was harder. She screamed at Ethan, directly said things that were cruel and pointed and clearly designed to find the exact spot that would make him leave. She had a gift for that, for finding the specific wound in a person and pressing on it. She told him his daughter was probably just as messed up as she was. She told him he was only there for the money. She told him he was stupid and useless and that she hoped he never came back. He sat through all of it. When she finished breathing hard, waiting for the reaction, he said, "Are you done?" She glared at him. "Maybe." "Okay." He leaned back in his chair. "When you're fully done, I'll be right here." "You're not leaving?" "No." "I said terrible things to you." "Yeah." He met her eyes. "And you were trying to see if I would, so now you know." Lena stared at him. Something broke open in her face, not dramatically, not the way it happened in movies. Just quietly. A small fracture in the armor. "Know what?" she said, her voice suddenly much smaller. "That I don't leave when it gets hard." She turned away from him. For a long moment she said nothing, then her back still to him. "Sorry. I know. I didn't mean the stuff about Maya. I know that too." She turned back around. Her eyes were red but dry. "My therapist used to say I have trouble with emotional regulation." "You're 9 and your dad died. I think that's pretty normal." She looked at him for a long moment. "You're not like a normal adult." "Thanks, I think." It wasn't a compliment, she said, but there was something in the way she said it that meant the opposite. Victoria watched all of it from the edges. She was careful not to crowd the space. Ethan had been clear about that too. Her presence needed to be steady, but not hovering, available, but not intrusive. He explained it to her once in a way that landed with uncomfortable precision. "She knows you love her. That's not the issue. The issue is she doesn't trust that love yet. Because everyone she loves leaves. So she's waiting for you to leave too. And every time you hover, every time you rush in to fix things, you accidentally confirm her fear that she can't handle things without being managed." Victoria had listened to this in silence. Then she said, "Are you saying I should do less?" "I'm saying you should do differently." "What does differently look like?" He thought about it. "Stop trying to answer her before she finishes asking." That hit harder than she expected. She had done that. She could see it now, the way she anticipated Lena's needs, intercepted her emotions, arrived with solutions before the problem was even fully stated. It was the same skill that made her an extraordinary CEO. Anticipate, prepare, solve. She had been applying boardroom strategy to motherhood and wondering why it wasn't working. "She feels like I don't hear her," Victoria said slowly. "She feels like her feelings make you anxious," Ethan said. "And when you're anxious, you go into fix mode. And when you go into fix mode, she shuts down. Because fix mode means the feelings are a problem. And if the feelings are a problem, then she's a problem." Victoria set down the coffee she'd been holding. "She thinks she's too much for me." "Yes. She's not." "I know that," Ethan said. "You know that. She doesn't." A silence stretched between them. Then Victoria said something she had never said to an employee, a colleague, a board member, or a business partner. "How do I fix it?" Ethan looked at her, and he said with complete gentleness and complete clarity, "You stop trying to fix it. You just stay. Through the bad evenings and the thrown books and the silences. You stay and you say nothing, and you let her feel whatever she's feeling without rushing to end it. That's it. That's the whole answer." Victoria looked at the table. "That's the hardest thing you've asked me to do," she said. "Yeah," he said. "It usually is." The first real breakthrough between Lena and Victoria happened on a Tuesday evening 3 weeks into Ethan's arrangement, and he wasn't even there when it occurred. Victoria had been working late in her home office, a conference call with their Singapore partners that ran 40 minutes over schedule. When she finally emerged at 9:15, she expected to find the house quiet. Margaret usually had Lena in bed by 8:30. Instead, she found Lena sitting at the kitchen counter with a cup of hot chocolate, still in her school clothes, clearly having waited. Victoria stopped in the doorway. "You're up late," she said carefully. "I know." A pause. "Are you okay?" Lena looked at the counter, then up. "There was this girl at school today," she said. "Her name is Priya. Her grandma died last month and she was crying in the bathroom and everyone was just standing there not doing anything." Victoria waited. "So I sat on the floor," Lena said, "next to her, like Ethan did." Something moved through Victoria's chest like a wave. "Did it help?" she said. Lena shrugged with the careful nonchalance of someone who cared very much. She stopped crying. "And then we talked for a while. She said her grandma used to braid her hair." A pause. "I told her my dad used to make me sandwiches with the crusts cut off, even when I was old enough that it was kind of babyish." "He loved doing that," Victoria said softly. Lena looked up. "Did he tell you that?" "He said it was the best part of his morning, making your lunch." Lena was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I miss him." It was not the first time she had said it. But it was the first time she had said it to Victoria directly, without rage wrapped around it, without the protective layer of anger that usually kept the grief at a safe distance. "I know," Victoria said. She did not move. She did not rush forward. She remembered what Ethan had said. "I miss him too." Lena looked at her. "Do you cry?" "Yes." "I've never seen you cry." Victoria came to the counter and sat down beside her daughter. Not across. Beside. "I know," she said. "I'm sorry. I thought if I cried you'd be scared. I thought I needed to be strong for you." "I thought you didn't care," Lena said. The words were quiet and simple, and they went through Victoria like something sharp. "I care so much I didn't know what to do with it," she said. "So I did all the wrong things instead." Lena looked at her hot chocolate. "Ethan says that's what people do when they're scared." "He's right. He's right about a lot of stuff." A pause. "Don't tell him I said that. He'll get weird about it." Victoria almost laughed. "I won't tell him." They sat there for another hour. Victoria did not solve anything. She did not fix anything. She just sat beside her daughter in the quiet kitchen and let the silence do what silence sometimes needed to do. When Lena finally said goodnight and disappeared upstairs, Victoria sat alone for a long time. Then she sent Ethan a message. 3 words. "Something happened tonight." His reply came back 12 minutes later. "Good something or bad something?" She typed back. "Good." Lena sat on the floor for someone. The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, that's everything. Victoria set her phone face down on the counter, and for the first time in 14 months alone in her kitchen at 10:30 at night, she cried. Not the controlled, private managed grief she allowed herself occasionally in locked bathrooms. Really cried. The kind that didn't have a shape or a schedule and didn't stop when she decided it should. She cried for James, for the year she'd lost to fear, for the daughter she'd been standing above when she should have been sitting beside, and she cried because something was finally moving again. Something she'd been afraid had stopped forever. It was Ethan's daughter Maya who created the first real crisis. She came with him one Saturday in November because her school had a half day and their usual babysitting arrangement fell through. Ethan explained this briefly to Victoria on the phone, offered to reschedule, and Victoria had said immediately without thinking, "Bring her." She appeared in the doorway ahead of her father, a thin 11-year-old with Ethan's same calm dark eyes and a book clutched to her chest like a shield. She assessed the kitchen with the quiet thoroughness of a child who had learned to quickly calculate whether a new space was safe. Lena assessed her right back. "You're Maya," Lena said. "You're Lena," Maya said. "Your dad talks about you." "He talks about you too." A long beat. 2 children who had both been hollowed out by the same kind of loss taking each other's measure. "Do you want to see my drawings?" Lena said. Maya glanced at her book, then at Lena. "Sure." They disappeared upstairs. Ethan watched them go. Something in his face had changed softer, more complicated, the way faces looked when something unexpected happened that you didn't know you needed. "She never shows anyone her drawings," Victoria said quietly. "Maya doesn't talk to new people easily," Ethan said. "She's been getting better, but still." They stood in the kitchen, listening to footsteps above them. Then voices. Then, unmistakably, 2 girls laughing at something. Victoria looked at Ethan. He was looking at the ceiling with the expression of a man who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had just for one moment been allowed to set it down. "How are you doing?" Victoria asked. He looked at her. "I'm fine." "Ethan." He paused. "You come here 3 times a week, and you pour everything you have into my daughter," she said. "How are you actually doing?" A longer pause. The kind that meant the answer was real, and he was deciding whether to give it. "Some days are harder than others," he said finally. "Work stuff, bills. Maya had a medical thing last month that cost more than I had. The usual." He said it without self-pity, just flat and honest. "We manage. If you need..." "No." Firm, but not unkind. "Thank you, but no. I'm not doing this for money, and I'm not taking money for it. The minute I do, I become part of the transaction. And Lena can smell a transaction from a mile away. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. You are without question the most stubborn person I have ever met. He almost smiled. Second most. Your daughter has me beat. Upstairs, something else made the two girls laugh. Louder this time. Ethan and Victoria stood in the kitchen and listened to it, and neither of them said a single word for a full minute, because some sounds were too good to interrupt. The second crisis, the one that nearly broke everything, arrived without warning on a Thursday morning in December. Ethan arrived at his usual time, and Lena was already waiting at the kitchen table, which was unusual. She was normally still eating or still upstairs when he got there. The waiting itself would have told him something was off if he hadn't already known from the look on her face. She had heard him. The previous Thursday evening, Ethan had been in the garden with his phone thinking no one was around, and he'd been talking to his sister about money, about the possibility of taking a second job, about whether he could keep doing the Whitmore visits if he picked up overnight shifts somewhere, about whether he could afford both Maya's medical follow-up and the rent increase that was coming in January. He hadn't known Lena was in the garden too. She sat at the table now with her hands flat on the surface and her face completely closed. The armor was back, all of it full strength, everything Ethan had spent 8 weeks carefully and patiently helping to dismantle. You're leaving, she said. No question, no uncertainty. Lena, you're getting another job. You're going to stop coming. That's not... I heard you. Her voice was flat and precise and devastating in the way that only a child's voice could be when it was stripped of all pretense. On the phone, last Thursday, you said you couldn't keep doing this. Ethan pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. He didn't touch her. He didn't reach across the table. He just sat there and looked at her directly and thought carefully about every word he was going to say next, because there was no room here for anything except complete truth. You heard part of a conversation, he said. I heard enough. Lena, look at me. He waited until she did. I said I was thinking about what happens if I need a second job. That's true. Money is tight right now, and it might get tighter. That's real. I'm not going to lie to you about that. A pause. But thinking about a problem is not the same as walking away from you. Those are two completely different things. She stared at him. Adults have problems, he said. We have money problems and work problems and health problems, and we don't always handle them perfectly. But having problems is not the same as leaving. He held her gaze. I have never lied to you, not once. So when I tell you that I am not planning to disappear, I need you to trust that. You can't promise that, she said. Her voice cracked, just slightly. Nobody can promise that. My dad didn't promise that either, and then he was gone. And there it was, the real thing. The thing underneath all of it. The thing that had been underneath all of it from the very beginning. Ethan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was low and steady. You're right, he said. I can't promise I'll never die. I can't promise nothing will ever happen. That would be a lie, and I don't give you those. He leaned forward slightly. But I can promise you this. If anything ever changes, if I ever have to do something differently, I will tell you, to your face. No disappearing. No just not coming back. You will always know the truth. You have my word on that. She looked at him for a long time. Her chin was doing the thing it did when she was trying hard not to cry, trembling slightly at the corners. Can promises break? She said. It came out very small. Ethan didn't look away. Sometimes, but good people repair broken ones. A tear ran down Lena's face. She did not wipe it away. And Ethan Miller, who had spent 4 years learning to sit inside pain instead of running from it, who had rebuilt himself from nothing after the worst year of his life, who had walked into a charity gala in a gray uniform and changed 3 lives by simply sitting down on a floor, reached across the kitchen table and put his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. Outside, Victoria stood in the hallway with her back against the wall and her eyes closed. She had heard every word. She had not meant to listen, but she had, and now she was standing in her own hallway, discovering something she had somehow not fully understood until this moment. The person who was saving her daughter wasn't doing it with skill or training or expertise. He was doing it with everything he had left after losing the thing he loved most. And it was exactly enough. The hand thing lasted about 4 seconds. Then Lena pulled back, stood up, and announced she was going to get a glass of water. She said it in the flat, matter-of-fact tone she used when she needed to exit a moment before it became too real. Ethan understood. He let her go. He sat at the kitchen table and finished his coffee and pretended not to notice that she took 3 full minutes to get a glass of water from a tap that was 8 feet away. When she came back, she sat down and said, "Do you want to see what I drew yesterday?" "Yeah," he said. "I do." She put the sketchbook on the table. He looked at the drawing. He didn't say it was beautiful or impressive or any of the things adults said when they were performing appreciation. He just looked at it carefully, a pencil sketch of 2 people sitting on opposite sides of a table, and said, "Is that us?" "Maybe," she said. He looked closer. In the drawing, both figures had their hands near the center of the table. Not quite touching. Almost. "Good drawing," he said. She took the sketchbook back. "I know." It was the closest thing to lightness that morning was going to offer, and they both accepted it. In the hallway, Victoria finally moved away from the wall. She went to her office and sat at her desk and looked at the quarterly reports that needed her attention without reading a single word of them. She sat there thinking about what she had just overheard, turning it over, the way you turned over something fragile that you were afraid to put down too hard. Ethan was struggling financially. He had been for a while. He had hidden it completely, not from pride exactly, she thought, but from something more careful than that. He had hidden it because he understood that the moment it became visible, she would try to solve it. And the moment she tried to solve it, she would change what he was inside the arrangement. She would make him an employee again. And employees eventually left. She understood that now. She also understood that understanding it did not tell her what to do. Because doing nothing while someone carried that kind of weight was its own kind of wrong. She picked up her phone. She put it down. She picked it up again. Then she called her lawyer instead. The board meeting happened on a Wednesday 3 days later. Victoria had not expected it. Or rather, she had expected it eventually, but not yet, and not in the form it arrived. She walked into the Whitmore Foundation quarterly review to find that Gerald Price had added an agenda item. It was listed as Staff and Volunteer Conduct Review. She knew immediately. Gerald was 64 years old and had been on the foundation board for 9 years. He was not a bad man. He was the particular kind of man who had spent his entire life in rooms where people like him made decisions about people who were not like him, and who had developed through years of practice a complete blindness to the difference between institutional concern and personal discomfort. He had been the man who patted Lena's head at the gala. He had apparently not forgotten the centerpiece incident. He opened with language that was careful and considered and entirely constructed to sound reasonable. Words like optics and liability and appropriate professional boundaries. He spoke about the foundation's responsibility to maintain public confidence. He spoke about the importance of ensuring that relationships between staff and the families they served were properly structured and supervised. He never said Ethan's name. I didn't have to. Everyone in the room knew exactly whose name he meant. Victoria let him finish. She sat at the head of the table with her hands flat on the surface, a posture Lena would have recognized, and she listened to the whole thing without interrupting once. When Gerald finished, she said, "Are you done?" He blinked. It was, several people noted later, a remarkably similar response to the one Ethan had given Lena 2 months earlier. "I believe I've raised concerns that warrant, Gerald." Her voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. "You're talking about a man who accomplished in one evening what 3 credentialed specialists could not accomplish in 14 months. You're framing that as a liability." "I'm framing it as an unstructured and unsupervised. He comes to my home, which I own. He interacts with my daughter, who is mine. The foundation's liability exposure is exactly 0. She looked around the table. "If anyone here would like to discuss what actually constitutes a liability, I'm happy to talk about what our PR exposure would have been if those phone cameras at the gala had captured nothing but my 9-year-old daughter melting down while the adults in the room stood in a circle watching. Silence. He sat on the floor, she said. He sat on the floor and he cried with her. And she stopped. That's what happened. And I will not sit here and allow it to be turned into a governance problem because one board member is still embarrassed about a glass centerpiece. Gerald's jaw tightened. Victoria, I understand you feel strongly. I do feel strongly. She folded her hands. I also have controlling interest in this foundation and the votes to match. So let me be very clear about where we are. Ethan Miller is not a foundation employee in his current capacity. He is not bound by your conduct policy. And if the board would like to spend its time on this particular hill, I will spend my time on the hill of restructuring the board composition at the next election cycle. The room was very quiet. Gerald looked at his papers. Moving on, Victoria said. Item 3, the community outreach budget. The meeting continued, but something had shifted in the room and everyone could feel it. Not just in the outcome of the argument, in Victoria herself. She had always been formidable. She had always been precise and controlled and strategically brilliant. But this was different. This was personal in a way that her professional authority never was. She wasn't protecting an asset or defending a position. She was defending a person. And the board members to a one filed that away as something important. She told Ethan about it that Thursday. She hadn't planned to. She had in fact decided specifically not to because she didn't want him to feel obligated, didn't want to shift the dynamic, didn't want to add the weight of her protection to something he was carrying on his own. But he came in that Thursday and immediately read her face the way he read everything with the quiet directness that she was still getting used to and said, something happened. The board raised concerns about your involvement, she said. He went very still. What kind of concerns? The liability and optics kind. And I told them to back down. He looked at her for a long moment. You didn't have to do that. I know. It could create problems for you. It won't. Victoria, Ethan. She met his eyes. Someone sat on the floor of my event and cried in front of 200 people because my daughter needed someone too. The absolute minimum I can do is tell 12 people in a conference room to mind their business. Something moved across his face. It was brief and it was carefully controlled, but she caught it the look of someone who was not accustomed to being defended and was not entirely sure how to hold the feeling of it. Thank you, he said. Don't mention it, she said. And she meant it literally. She turned back to the document she'd been reviewing. How's Maya? He paused at the shift. Then, good. Her follow-up was clear. Numbers were normal. A breath she recognized as the specific exhale of a parent who had been holding something for a long time. She's been drawing again. She goes through phases where she stops and then starts back up. Like Lena. Maybe. He half smiled. They've been texting each other. Victoria looked up. They have started about 2 weeks ago. Maya showed me. They're mostly sending each other pictures of things they've drawn. No words, just drawings back and forth. He paused. I don't know if you know how big that is for Maya. She's careful about people. After her mom died, she got very careful. She doesn't just reach out. Victoria thought about 2 girls sitting on opposite ends of their separate lives, exchanging drawings like letters. 2 girls who had both learned that the people you loved could simply stop being there one day. Finding each other in the only language that felt safe. That's everything, she said softly. He looked at her. That's what you texted me, after the kitchen floor thing. I borrowed it from someone wise, she said. He laughed. It was brief, and a little surprised, the laugh of someone who didn't expect to find one in the middle of a hard conversation. But it was real. And Victoria, who had spent 14 months forgetting what real laughter sounded like in this house, held on to the sound of it. Then December brought something nobody had prepared for. It started with a school project. Lena's 4th grade teacher, Ms. Ramos, a young woman with bright eyes and the particular brand of genuine enthusiasm, that made children feel seen, had assigned a family heritage project. Students were asked to bring in something meaningful from a family member, tell the class about it, and explain why it mattered. Lena came home with the assignment sheet and put it on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. When Victoria found her, she was holding her father's old watch. James's watch, a simple stainless steel thing he'd worn every day for the 14 years of their marriage. Not expensive, just his. "I want to bring this," Lena said. Victoria sat down beside her. "That's a good choice. But I have to talk about him." "Yes." In front of the class. A silence. "You don't have to if you don't want to." Lena turned the watch over in her hands. "I want to. I just—" She stopped. What if I start crying? Victoria thought about everything Ethan had told her. About not rushing in. About letting the silence do what it needed to do. She waited. What if I cry and everyone stares at me and thinks I'm... Lena. Victoria put her hand on her daughter's. If you cry, you cry. People cry about things that matter. That's not weakness. That's just love. Lena looked at her. Your dad mattered, Victoria said. That watch mattered. If you cry talking about it, that's not a problem. That's the point. Her daughter was quiet for a long moment. Then, will you come to the class thing? Victoria didn't hesitate. Yes. And Ethan? She paused. I'll ask him. Lena nodded. She put the watch in her pocket. Then she went upstairs without another word, which was Lena's version of an ending when things felt too big to continue. Victoria sat at the table with the assignment sheet in front of her and thought about the woman she had been 14 months ago. The woman who intercepted and managed and solved, and how far the distance was between that woman and the one who had just sat beside her daughter and said, "If you cry, you cry." She picked up her phone and texted Ethan. Lena has a school presentation. She wants you there. His reply was immediate. When? She sent the date. I'll be there. She set the phone down. She had been operating for over a year on the theory that love required action. That it was something you proved through effort and expense and careful management. That the best version of caring for someone was to remove every obstacle from their path. Ethan had shown her with extraordinary patience and zero fanfare that she had it exactly backward. Sometimes love required stillness, and letting someone walk their own path even when you wanted desperately to carry them. The presentation day came on a Thursday morning in mid-December. Victoria took the morning off work. This was not a small thing. She had not taken a morning off for anything personal in 4 years. Claire. Her assistant stared at the blocked calendar slot with an expression of genuine concern, as though the natural order of things was being disrupted. The natural order of things was in fact being disrupted. That was precisely the point. Ethan came in a button-down shirt, dark blue. He had clearly made an effort and was clearly uncomfortable with having made an effort, the way people looked when they dressed up for something, and then felt self-conscious about having dressed up. Victoria did not comment on it. She had learned with Ethan that commenting on certain things made them complicated in ways that silence didn't. They drove to the school separately. They sat in the back row of the classroom slightly apart from each other while 23 fourth graders showed the class their family heritage items. A girl named Sophia brought her grandmother's handkerchief from Puerto Rico. A boy named Theo brought his grandfather's military dog tags. A girl named Priya and Victoria recognized the name. The girl from the school bathroom, Lena's floor moment, brought a recipe card, written in her grandmother's handwriting. Then, Lena's name was called. She walked to the front of the class with her father's watch in her hand. She stood there for a moment. She looked at Ms. Ramos, who nodded. She looked at the class. Then she looked to the back row, and she found them. Victoria on one side, Ethan on the other, and she seemed to use them both like coordinates triangulating her exact position in the world. "This is my dad's watch," she said. Her voice was clear. His name was James Whitmore, and he died last year. He wore this watch every single day. He said it was the first thing he bought with his own money after college, and he was keeping it forever. The class was very quiet. Kids were good at quiet when it was real. "My dad was really good at sandwiches," Lena continued. He always cut the crusts off even though I was old enough not to need that anymore. He thought it was funny. He'd hand me the sandwich and do this thing with his eyebrows. She paused, made a brief small gesture with her face that Victoria recognized as a precise imitation of James, and that punched straight through her sternum. Like he was saying, "Yeah, I know you're not 5, I just felt like it." A few kids in the front row were smiling. I used to think about the watch a lot after he died. I was kind of angry at it for still working when he didn't. She looked at it in her hand. But now I think I don't know. Maybe that's the point. Things keep going. Time keeps going. And the people who mattered, they don't stop mattering just because they stop being here. She looked up. My dad didn't stop being my dad, she said. He's just somewhere else now, and I keep his watch because it helps me remember that the love part doesn't end. Just the being here part. She walked back to her seat. Ms. Ramos said something kind and moved to the next student, in the back row. Victoria was pressing her fingers against her mouth, a gesture her body had apparently decided was the minimum required to keep everything inside. Beside her, not close, not inappropriately close, but close enough that she was aware of him. Ethan was looking straight ahead, jaw tight, doing the same controlled internal work she was doing. She glanced at him. He glanced at her. Neither of them said anything. What was there to say? Her 9-year-old daughter had just stood in front of a room full of people and talked about love and loss and continuity with more clarity and grace than most adults managed in a lifetime. And 3 months ago, that same child had thrown a glass centerpiece at a gala and screamed at everyone who came near her. The distance between those two moments was named Ethan Miller. After the presentation, outside the school, while Lena was getting her coat from the classroom, Ethan stood on the sidewalk with his hands in his jacket pockets and said, "She did that herself, you know." Victoria looked at him. "I know. I mean it. I didn't coach her. I didn't tell her what to say. I know, Ethan. I just want to make sure you're not giving me credit for something that's hers." Victoria looked at him for a long moment. The December cold was sharp and real, and the sky above them was the particular pale gray that meant snow was considering its options. "Can I say something without you deflecting it?" He paused. "Probably not, but try. What you've done for my daughter," she said, "is not something I can put a name to. It's not therapy, and it's not parenting, and it's not any category I have a word for. But I want you to know that I see it, and I don't take it for granted. And whatever you need, not as payment, not as a transaction, but whatever you need, I would like to help if you would let me." He was quiet. "I know you don't want money," she said. "I'm not offering money. I'm offering whatever the other thing is, whatever people offer each other when they're not negotiating." Ethan looked at her. The dark circles under his eyes were the same as they'd always been, and she knew now what they cost him, and she looked at them directly instead of pretending not to notice. "I don't know what that is," he admitted. "Neither do I," she said. "I haven't been good at it, but I'm trying to learn." The school door opened. Lena appeared with her coat half on and her backpack dragging and her father's watch visible on her wrist, too big for her sliding toward her hand. She had put it on. For the first time since James died, she had put it on. She came toward them and looked at both of their faces and made the assessment that children made when they walked into an adult moment they weren't fully meant to understand. "Were you talking about me?" she said. "Yes," they both said simultaneously. She considered this. "Was it good or bad?" "Good," they said. Again simultaneously. She looked between them with an expression that said she found this suspicious and also slightly satisfying. "Okay," she said. Then to Ethan, "You wore a nice shirt." "Thank you. It's still weird to see you without the uniform." "You've seen me without the uniform like 40 times. "Still weird," she said firmly. Then she reached out and took Victoria's hand casually, without announcement, the way she might have done it when she was 5, and started walking toward the car. Victoria did not react. She matched Lena's pace and kept her face forward and kept breathing steadily because if she reacted, Lena would feel it and might pull back. And she had waited 14 months for her daughter's hand in hers, without fanfare, without apology, without any of the careful meaning that Victoria would have attached to it. She just walked. Behind them, Ethan Miller stood on the sidewalk with his hands in his jacket pockets and watched a billionaire CEO and her 9-year-old daughter walk to a car together, connected by something as ordinary and irreplaceable as held hands. And he thought about Maya, who was at school right now, probably in the middle of math, probably drawing in the margins of her notebook. And he thought about the drawings she and Lena exchanged. And he thought about how grief left alone carved people into separate islands, but given time and patience and someone willing to sit on the floor, it sometimes built bridges instead. He was still thinking about that when Victoria's car reached the end of the block, and it was in that exact moment of watching it disappear that his phone rang. He pulled it out. Unknown number. Chicago area code. Hello? A pause on the other end. Then a voice he hadn't heard in 3 years. Ethan. A woman's voice, low and careful and carrying something he couldn't immediately name. It's Dana. Dana, his late wife's sister. Dana, he said. The name felt strange in his mouth. Is everything okay? I need to talk to you, she said. About Maya, about something I found. The cold air seemed to get sharper around him. Found what? He said. Another pause, longer this time. Information, she said. About the accident. Ethan stood very still on the sidewalk outside an elementary school in December. What information? He said. His voice came out steady. He was not sure how. Not on the phone, Dana said. Can you come to Chicago? The car had disappeared completely now, around a corner carrying Lena and her father's watch on her wrist and her mother's hand in hers. How to stay, stood on the sidewalk facing the possibility that the story of the worst night of his life might not be over. I'll come, he said. When? Soon, she said. Ethan soon. He didn't tell Victoria. That was the first decision he made, standing on that sidewalk with Dana's voice still in his ear and the cold pressing in from all sides. He pocketed the phone and stood there for a moment, doing the same internal calculation he'd done 4 years ago on the night a police officer knocked on his door, sorting through what was real, what was manageable, what he could carry without letting it show. He was good at that. He was dangerously good at that. He drove to Chicago the following Saturday. He told Maya he had an errand, told her she'd be staying with his neighbor Mrs. Kowalski for the afternoon, told her it wasn't a big deal. Maya, who was 11 and sharper than most adults he knew, looked at him with her mother's eyes and said, "Is it about work?" "Sort of," he said. She studied him for another second. Then, "Okay." She picked up her book. "Bring me something from the good bakery on Wacker." He almost laughed. "I don't know if I'll be near Wacker." "Then be near Wacker," she said, and went back to reading. He drove the 90 minutes to Chicago with the radio off, which was something he only did when he needed the silence to think. He went through every version of what Dana might have found, every possibility. The accident had been ruled straightforward. A wet highway, a car that crossed the center line, a driver who walked away with minor injuries while Sarah did not walk away at all. That was the story. It had been investigated. It had been closed. He had accepted it with the brutal totality of someone who had no other choice. But Dana had said information about the accident. And Dana was not the kind of person who called out of a 3-year silence for nothing. She met him at a coffee shop. She was there when he arrived, already seated, her hands wrapped around a mug she was clearly using as a physical anchor. She had Sarah's coloring, dark hair, dark eyes, but none of Sarah's easy warmth. Dana had always been the careful sister, the one who thought things through before speaking. Seeing her do it now, watching him sit down, and watching her decide where to start, made his chest go tight. "How's Maya?" she said. "She's good. She's great, actually." He paused. "Dana, what did you find?" She looked at the table, then at him. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope and set it between them. He didn't touch it. "After Mom died last year," she said, "I was going through her things. Storage unit she had on the south side. Most of it was junk. Old furniture boxes of holiday stuff. But there was a box in the back that had letters in it. And documents." She pushed the envelope toward him. She'd been corresponding with someone, Ethan. For 2 years after Sarah died. Someone who knew more about the accident than the police report said. He looked at the envelope. The driver, Dana said. The one who crossed the line. His insurance company, their investigators had evidence that his brake system had a manufacturer defect. They knew about it before the accident. They had internal reports warnings that had been ignored. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. They buried it, settled quietly with the families of 2 other accidents before Sarah's. And then Sarah's case was closed before anyone connected them. Ethan's hand moved to the envelope. Your mother-in-law knew, he said. It wasn't a question. It came out flat and quiet. She found out 18 months after the accident. She had a contact in the insurance industry, an old friend. He'd heard something and told her. She spent 2 years trying to decide what to do with it. Dana's voice cracked on the edges. She didn't want to reopen it for you and Maya. She thought it would only cause more pain. She thought you'd moved forward, and she didn't want to pull you back. Ethan sat with that for a moment. His mother-in-law, who had brought him soup every Sunday for 6 months after Sarah died. Who had held Maya at the funeral when Ethan couldn't hold anything. Who had died herself 14 months ago quietly from a heart that had been failing for years. She had carried this alone, to protect him. He opened the envelope. The documents were exactly what Dana had described. Internal memos, test results, a chain of correspondence between a claims adjuster and a senior legal officer that discussed the brake defect in language, so careful and so deliberately vague that its meaning was perfectly clear. There were 3 accidents in the file. Sarah's was the 3rd. He read all of it. Dana watched him read it and didn't say anything. When he finished, he put it back in the envelope. He sat very still. The coffee shop around him continued its ordinary Saturday business people coming in from the cold, ordering things, laughing at something on their phones, and he sat in the middle of all that ordinary life and held something that felt like the floor dropping out from under everything he thought he knew about the worst day of his life. What do you want to do? Dana said. He looked at her. What do you mean? There's a law firm, Environmental and Product Liability. They've been building a case against the manufacturer for the last year. They reached out to Mom, and now they've reached out to me. They want testimony documentation. They want Sarah's case included. She held his gaze. They think they can win. A silence. Ethan, she said. You could get justice for her. He looked at the envelope in his hands. I thought about Sarah, who had been 29 years old and had made him pancakes the morning she died and had kissed him goodbye at the door. He thought about Maya, who had been 7, who had asked every night for 2 months whether Daddy was sure Mommy wasn't coming back. He thought about the years of rebuilding slow and painful and real, the years of making something solid out of what remained. He thought about Lena Whitmore, who had asked him whether promises could break. He thought about himself sitting on a marble floor in a gray uniform. Then he thought about Victoria, standing in a conference room and telling 12 board members to back down. He said, I need a few days. Dana nodded. The firm isn't going anywhere. He stood up. He picked up the envelope. Then he put it back down. Keep it, he said. I know what's in it. I don't need to carry it around until I know what I'm going to do. She looked at him. You okay? He thought about that honestly. No, he said. But I'm used to not being okay and functioning anyway. He went to the bakery on Wacker. He brought Maya a croissant. He did not tell her what he knew. He didn't come to the Whitmore house that Tuesday. It was the first time in 3 months that he had missed a scheduled visit without advance notice. Lena noticed within the first hour. Victoria knew, because she heard Lena's footsteps, that specific pattern, the slightly harder landing on every 3rd step, that indicated she was moving through the house with purpose and irritation, going up and down the stairs twice before Lena appeared in the doorway of her office. He's not here, Lena said. I know. Victoria looked up from her laptop. He sent me a message. He had something come up. What something? A personal thing. He'll be here Thursday. Lena stared at her. Is he sick? No. Is Maya sick? No, everyone is fine. He just had something he needed to handle. Lena stood in the doorway for a moment with her arms crossed, doing the internal arithmetic that she always did now when something felt uncertain. Not the panicked reaching for worst-case scenarios she used to do, but a more careful calculation, the kind that Ethan had been teaching her. What do I know? What don't I know? What am I filling in from fear? Okay, she said. Victoria looked at her. That was it. Just okay. 3 months ago, the same information would have produced a locked door and a thrown object and 45 minutes of managed crisis. Now it produced okay. He'll call you later if you want, Victoria said. I can ask him. He doesn't have to. Lena shifted her weight. He said he'd be here Thursday, so he'll be here Thursday. She started to turn away, then turned back. Can I have the good crackers? The cabinet above the microwave. She disappeared. Victoria looked back at her screen without reading any of it. She had not told Lena the truth about Ethan's message, which had said not that he had something to handle, but that something had come up, and he needed a couple of days, and he was sorry about the short notice. That was all. He hadn't explained, and she hadn't pushed, because she understood now better than she had understood 3 months ago, that Ethan Miller had a whole life that existed before she knew him, and beside the arrangement, and entirely outside of her visibility. And that part of trusting someone was letting them have things you didn't get to see. But she was worried. She could not pretend she wasn't. She picked up her phone, typed and deleted 3 different messages. Finally sent. Take whatever time you need. Lena's fine. Hope you're okay. He replied 4 hours later. Getting there. Thursday for sure. She held the phone. Getting there. Not I'm fine. Not everything is great. Getting there. She thought about Dana's phone call, which she knew nothing about, and the envelope which she knew nothing about, and Ethan standing on a sidewalk processing something alone, because that was what he did. He carried things alone. He had been carrying things alone for so long that it had become as natural as breathing. She thought, I would like to change that. Then she thought, I don't know if I have the right. Then Lena appeared in the doorway, eating crackers, and said, Do you want some? And Victoria said yes, and they sat together in the office, while Victoria answered emails, and Lena drew in her sketchbook, and it was so ordinary and so good that Victoria filed the worry about Ethan away for later. Later, it turned out, was Thursday. He came at his usual time. He looked like someone who had slept badly for 2 days and was compensating with effort. Victoria could read it now, the slight set of his jaw, the way his eyes were a fraction too controlled. The tell of a person who had decided to hold something in and was working at it continuously. She gave him coffee. She did not ask immediately. She had learned patience from him, which was its own particular kind of irony. It was Lena who cracked it open. She was at the kitchen table doing homework. Multiplication tables, her least favorite thing in the known universe, which she narrated regularly to anyone who would listen when she looked up at Ethan and said, You look like you got run over. He raised his eyebrows. Thank you. Are you sick? No. Did something bad happen? A beat. He looked at her. Then he looked at Victoria. Then back at Lena. Something complicated happened, he said. I found out some information about how my wife died. I'm still figuring out what to do with it. Lena put her pencil down. The kitchen went very quiet. What kind of information? She said. The kind that means the accident wasn't completely an accident, he said carefully. The kind that means some people knew something they should have said and didn't, and now I have to decide whether I want to do something about it. Lena looked at him steadily. Like they lied? More like they were very careful to stay silent. That's the same as lying. Yeah, he said. It kind of is. She thought about this. Does Maya know? Not yet. Are you going to tell her? I was quiet for a moment. When I figure out the right way. Lena picked up her pencil and then put it back down. She was working through something, he could see it, that specific internal motion of a child, processing something larger than their vocabulary. Does it change things? She said finally. Knowing, in some ways. Like, does it make you more sad or more angry? He considered it. More angry. But a different kind of angry than I was before. The kind that has somewhere to go instead of just, He made a gesture that encompassed everything and nothing. "Instead of just sitting in you," she said. He looked at her. "Yeah, exactly that." She nodded as though this confirmed something she had already believed. "You should do something about it," she said. "Not because it changes anything about Maya's mom, but because if other people's moms and dads are going to get hurt by the same thing, and nobody does anything." She looked at her multiplication tables. "That seems wrong." Ethan sat back in his chair. He had driven 90 minutes to Chicago and back. He had spent 2 days turning the decision over from every angle. He had weighed what it would cost against what it might mean for Sarah, for Maya, for the other families whose names were in Dana's envelope. And his 9-year-old had just laid it out in 6 sentences. "Yeah," he said, "it does seem wrong." Victoria, who had been standing at the counter pretending to look at something on her tablet, set the tablet down. "If there's a legal matter," she said, "I'd like to help." He looked at her. "Not as a transaction," she said directly. She met his eyes. "As someone who knows people. Specifically, I know the best product liability attorneys in the country. If you need representation or counsel, I can make a call." He was quiet. "Ethan." Her voice was firm, but not hard. "You sat on my floor and cried for my daughter when you had no reason to. Please do not tell me this is different." He stared at her. "It is different," he said. "How?" "Because that was about Lena. And this is about Maya, and you." She held his gaze. "Which makes it exactly the same." A long pause. "I don't want it to become public," he said. "Maya doesn't need reporters. It won't become public unless you choose that. Initial counsel is confidential. You'd only be talking to a lawyer." He thought about it. "One call," he finally said. "One call," she agreed. She picked up her phone and made the call right there in the kitchen, standing at the counter while Lena went back to her multiplication tables and Ethan drank his coffee. She spoke for 3 minutes efficiently and precisely in the voice that had closed billion-dollar deals. When she hung up, she said, "Monday morning. He'll meet you at his office. No charge for the initial consultation." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Thank you," he said. "Don't mention it," she said. And she meant it exactly the same way she'd meant it on the sidewalk outside the school. He almost smiled. And Lena, without looking up from her worksheet, said, "Finally." Both adults looked at her. "You two are so slow," she said. "Ethan, eat something. You look terrible." He laughed, really laughed, the kind that caught him off guard, and Victoria went to get crackers from the cabinet above the microwave, and the kitchen settled back into its Thursday rhythm, and something that had been coiled tight in the room since Ethan walked in through the door quietly came loose. The Monday meeting happened. The attorney was named Richard Castellano, and he was 60 years old and had spent 30 years taking on companies that had decided human lives were a cost-benefit calculation. He read Dana's documents in 12 minutes. He asked Ethan 4 questions. Then he folded his hands and said, "Mr. Miller, this is a strong case. The documentation is clear. The pattern of suppression is clear, and the manufacturer in question has been the subject of a separate NHTSA investigation for the past 8 months that your information would directly support." Ethan looked at the documents spread across the table. "What does it mean for Maya?" It means a settlement if you choose that route. It means your daughter's name attached to something that forces accountability if you choose the other route." Castellano looked at him steadily. "It means the company cannot pretend this didn't happen." Ethan sat with that. Sarah had been 39 years old when she died. She had been a kindergarten teacher. She had coached Maya's soccer team and made excellent chili and laughed too loud at her own jokes. She had been alive, and then she had not been, and a room full of executives had looked at documents describing the risk that created and chosen to say nothing. "What does my involvement look like?" he said. "At minimum, a sworn statement. The documents do most of the work. You wouldn't need to be the public face of anything." Castellano paused. "But I'll be honest with you. Cases like this, they carry more weight when there's a face, when there's a story. When a jury or a judge or even just a settlement negotiation involves the human reality of what was lost." He met Ethan's eyes. "I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what it is." Ethan thought about a 9-year-old girl standing in front of a class with her father's watch on her wrist, saying, "The love part doesn't end." He thought about Maya drawing in the margins of her notebook. He thought about sitting on a marble floor. "Tell me what the process looks like," he said. "All of it, from the beginning." Castellano nodded and told him. He was 3 blocks from the attorney's office when his phone rang. It was the Foundation's HR director. A woman named Priscilla, whose voice he recognized immediately and who had never called him directly in the 2 years he'd worked there. "Mr. Miller," she said, "I'm calling about your employment status." He stopped walking. "What about it?" A pause that lasted exactly long enough to tell him something was wrong. "The board voted this morning on a motion to reclassify certain part-time contracted service positions. Your role has been identified as one that—" "Priscilla." He kept his voice even. "Say it plainly." Another pause. "Your night shift contract is being terminated. Effective end of month. You'll receive the standard notice package." He stood on the sidewalk in December cold. Was this the board's motion, he said, or was it Gerald Price's silence? "Priscilla." "Mr. Miller, I'm not in a position to discuss." "I understand," he said. "Thank you for calling." He hung up. He stood there for a moment, doing the math he'd been avoiding doing since the rent increase notice arrived in November. The janitor salary had been supplementing what he made from 2 other part-time arrangements that had both thinned out over the fall. Losing the Foundation contract put him below the threshold, below the point where the numbers worked. He thought about Gerald Price, who had not forgotten the centerpiece, who had been told by Victoria to back down in a board meeting and had waited patiently for a motion that didn't require her presence to pass. He thought about the fact that he could call Victoria right now, that she would be furious, that she would deal with it efficiently and completely in the same way she dealt with everything. He thought about how much he did not want to make that call, and then he thought about Maya, about the medical follow-up that had come back clear but would need monitoring, about the rent, about the fact that he had spent his entire adult life believing that the right way to handle a problem was to handle it yourself quietly, without requiring anything from anyone, and that this belief had served him in some ways and cost him in others. He stood on the sidewalk. He made the call. "Victoria," he said when she answered, "I need to tell you something." "What happened?" he told her. The silence on the other end lasted 5 seconds. Then he heard something he had not heard from her before. Not her CEO voice, not her careful mother voice, not the patient and measured register she used when she was making space for something difficult. He heard her angry. He did what she said. "End of month. Gerald Price is on 3 committees that have their renewal votes in January," she said. The precision in her voice was extraordinary. It had the quality of a very sharp thing that had just been picked up. He just made a significant strategic error. "Victoria." "Don't," she said. "Don't tell me to be measured." He waited until I wasn't in the room, and he used my Foundation's HR process to retaliate against a man who helped my daughter. "That is not something I'm going to be measured about." I was quiet. "I'm going to fix this," she said. "I know you are. But I need you to know that if you fix it, I still have to have a conversation with you about what comes next. Because I can't." He stopped, found the words. "I can't be dependent on your goodwill, Victoria. Even when your goodwill is genuine. Because the day something changes between us, the stability I've been building for Maya and for Lena goes with it." A silence. "I know that," she said. Her voice had shifted. Quieter now. More careful. "I know. And I've been thinking about that too." A pause. "There's something I want to propose. Not as a fix, not as a transaction, but as something I think might actually make sense for everyone if you hear me out." "What is it?" "Not on the phone," she said. "Can you come over tonight?" I thought about Maya, who was with Mrs. Kowalski, and who had asked him to be near Wacker, and whom he had brought a croissant, and who was probably drawing right now in the margins of something. "After 7, he said. "After 7, she agreed. He put the phone in his pocket. He stood on that Chicago sidewalk in the December cold, with the legal file in his bag, and the termination call in his recent calls, and 2 90-minute drives ahead of him, and he thought this is what it looks like when things are about to change completely. He was not afraid of it. He had learned in the last 4 years that the things that changed everything did not always announce themselves with warning. Sometimes they looked like a marble floor and a little girl who needed someone to sit down. And sometimes they looked like standing outside in the cold, figuring out how to walk through the next door. He started walking. He arrived at 7:15. Margaret let him in without a word and pointed toward the living room, which meant Victoria had told her to expect him, and also that whatever was happening tonight was serious enough to warrant the good room instead of the kitchen. Ethan noted this but didn't comment on it. He was getting better at reading the architecture of the Whitmore household, which rooms meant, which things, which silences meant, which moods, what it signified when Margaret pointed instead of led. Victoria was standing near the window when he walked in. Not sitting. Standing, which meant she had been moving around the room before he arrived, which meant she was nervous, which was not a thing he had seen from her very often. She turned when she heard him. "Lena's asleep," she said. "Okay." She waited up until 9:30. She wanted to see you. Something moved in his chest. "I'll be here Tuesday." "I told her." Victoria gestured toward the couch. "Sit down, please." He sat. She sat across from him. Between them on the coffee table was a folder, slim dark blue, the kind that came from a law office or a corporate document room. He looked at it. "Before I say anything," she said, "I want to ask you something directly, and I want you to answer directly the same way you always do. No deflecting." "I'll try." "Are you okay not the managing version, the real version?" I was quiet for a moment. "I've had a hard week," he said. "The Chicago thing, and then Priscilla's call, and trying to figure out what to tell Maya about the case, and—" He stopped. "No, I'm not fully okay. I'm getting there." She nodded, like she had expected that, and was glad he said it. "Gerald Price," she said, "submitted a written resignation this afternoon." Ethan went still. "What?" "He resigned from the board, effective immediately." Her voice was level. "He cited personal reasons. His letter was 4 sentences long." She paused. "I did not ask for the resignation. I was going to revoke the termination through the standard override process, but he submitted the resignation before I had the chance." A beat. "I believe he realized that the alternative me at the January committee reviews with full documentation of his conduct over the last 3 months was less appealing." Ethan looked at her. "You didn't threaten him." "I did not threaten anyone. I simply made sure he had access to accurate information about his situation." She kept a perfectly straight face. He drew his own conclusions. He almost laughed. "Victoria, the termination is void. Your contract is reinstated." She leaned forward. "But that's not why I asked you here." She opened the folder. She slid a single page across the coffee table. He picked it up. It was a proposal structured formal, but not cold. The language was careful in a way that told him she had written it herself, and then had someone review it, not the other way around. The Whitmore Foundation Family Resilience Program, Director of Community Outreach and Peer Support. He read it. He read the whole thing without saying anything. It took him 4 minutes. When he finished, he set it down and looked at her. "This is a real position," he said. "Yes. Full salary. Benefits. Yes. You're creating this for me." "I'm creating this because it needs to exist," she said. "What you do, the thing you did with Lena, the thing you do just by being the kind of person you are. There are hundreds of families in this city who need access to exactly that. Grieving children whose parents don't know how to reach them. Single parents who are doing everything right and still can't get through. People who have been told to see a specialist, but what they actually need is someone who has lived through the same thing and stayed on the other side of it." She met his eyes. "That is a program. That is a real program that this foundation should be running. And you are the right person to build it." He looked at the proposal. "I'm not a clinician," he said. "The program includes partnership with licensed therapists. You're not replacing clinical care. You're building the human infrastructure around it, the part that makes the clinical care actually work." She paused. The part nobody else is doing. He was quiet. Ethan. Her voice changed. Dropped the professional register. Became the voice she used in the kitchen on Tuesday mornings. You came to my building 2 years ago and cleaned floors at night because you needed to pay rent and take care of your daughter. And in that building in that gray uniform, you became the person who changed my family. I don't think that happened by accident. I think you are the person you are because of everything you've lived through. And I think it would be a genuine waste, not of your potential, not of your skill set, but of something rarer than both of those, if you spent the next 10 years cleaning buildings when you could be doing this. He set the proposal back on the table. He looked at his hands. Maya would still be in the same school, he said. Same school, same neighborhood if you want. The position can be structured to give you flexibility around her schedule. The legal case if it goes forward if it becomes public at some point. The foundation stands behind you, fully, in writing if you need that. He was quiet for a long time. Outside somewhere, a car passed. The house settled into its nighttime sounds, the small shifts and sighs of a large old building at rest. Somewhere upstairs, Lena was asleep with her father's watch on the nightstand and her sketchbook on the pillow. I want Maya to meet Lena properly, he said. Not just at the house. I want them to have something that's theirs, separate from all of this. I think they already do, Victoria said. He looked up. They've been texting each other every day for 6 weeks, she said. Lena showed me last Tuesday. They're not just sending drawings anymore. They talk. A pause. Lena told Priya at school that Maya is her best friend. I found out from Ms. Ramos. Ethan sat back. 2 girls, 11 and 9, both carrying the same weight in different shapes. Finding each other in the margins of their separate lives and deciding without any adult direction whatsoever that they needed each other. Okay, he said. Victoria looked at him. Okay as in yes. He met her eyes. I'll do it. She exhaled. Not a dramatic exhale, just the quiet release of someone who had been holding something carefully for a long time and could finally set it down. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me yet. I'm going to have opinions about how the program runs. I would be alarmed if you didn't. I'm going to want families to have real access, not just foundation donors, not just people who can afford the neighborhood. Regular families, working families, the kind who clean buildings at night. That's already in the proposal, she said. Page 3. He glanced at page 3. It was exactly as he would have written it. You knew what I was going to say, he said. I've been listening to you for 3 months, she said simply. I took notes. He looked at her. And something passed between them in that moment that neither of them named because naming it would have made it smaller than it was. Something that had been building quietly for 3 months in kitchen conversations and school sidewalks and Tuesday mornings, and one particularly significant night when a man in a gray uniform sat down on a marble floor and changed the direction of 3 lives simultaneously. He picked up the proposal. He folded it and put it in his jacket pocket. I should go, he said. Maya's at the neighbor's. Of course. Victoria stood. He stood. They were briefly in the same small space at the end of the couch closer than usual, and neither of them moved away from it. Ethan, she said. Yeah. For what it's worth. She looked at him directly. I think Sarah would be proud of who you are. The words landed somewhere he hadn't expected. He stood with them for a moment. For what it's worth, he said finally. I think James would be glad it was you who figured out how to stay. Victoria pressed her lips together. Not to stop tears past that, probably. Just to hold the weight of it for a second before it settled. Good night, she said. Good night, Victoria. He walked out through the front door. Margaret, who had been in the hallway doing absolutely nothing convincingly, handed him his coat. He drove home in the dark. He told Maya on a Sunday, not everything. Not the technical language of the lawsuit. Not the documents, not the suppression strategy. She was 11. She was also in many ways older than 11. He had learned not to underestimate her. So he sat with her at their kitchen table, with no preamble, no careful setup, No therapeutic framing, the way she had always responded best. "I found out something about the accident," he said. "About how Mom died." Maya put down her spoon. "The company that made the car that hit her, they knew something was wrong with their brakes before it happened. And they didn't tell anyone. And I'm going to do something about it with some lawyers. I wanted you to know." She was quiet for a moment. He watched her absorb it, not absorb. The way she did everything. "Why didn't they tell anyone?" she said. "Because fixing it cost money, and telling people cost more." She thought about that. "That's really bad." "Yeah. Are other people going to get hurt if nobody does anything?" "Possibly. That's part of why I'm moving forward." She looked at her cereal. "Does it?" She stopped. "Does it change anything about her? Like, does it change how it happened?" He reached across the table and put his hand over hers. "It changes why," he said. "Not what. She's still gone either way. But knowing why means we can make sure it doesn't happen to someone else's mom." Maya sat with that for a long moment. Then she looked up. "Is Lena's mom helping with the lawyer thing?" He paused. She made an "Yeah. I figured." Maya picked up her spoon. "She seems like the kind of person who knows lawyers." He looked at her. "What do you think of her, Victoria?" Maya considered it seriously. "She's better than she was at first," she said. "At first, she watched Lena like she was going to break. Now she just watches her. Like regular watching." She stirred her cereal. "Lena says her mom cried last week. She heard her through the door. She said she didn't know what to do, so she went in anyway, and they just sat there." Ethan hadn't heard this. "What happened?" he said. "Lena said they didn't really talk. They just sat." Maya shrugged the shrug of someone who found this completely logical. She said it was okay. Just sat. He thought about everything he'd said to Victoria in the last 3 months. All the things he'd tried to explain about sitting inside the hard moments instead of running from them. About not fixing, about not solving, about letting the silence do what silence needed to do. Victoria had not needed the lesson to be repeated. She had simply gone through the door. "That's good," he said. "Yeah," Maya agreed. "Can I call Lena later? We were going to draw together on video." "Sure," he said. "After lunch." She went back to her cereal, and Ethan sat at his kitchen table on a Sunday morning, watching his 11-year-old daughter make plans with her best friend, and thought about all the things that could have gone differently. The night he could have stayed in the service corridor instead of walking toward the noise. The day he could have taken the money. The moment he could have walked away when Lena screamed at him. The evening he could have refused the proposal and gone home and kept everything at a distance. Every door he had chosen to walk through. Every floor he had chosen to sit down on. He drank his coffee. The Whitmore Foundation Family Resilience Program launched in March. It was not a gala event. It was not a press release and a ribbon cutting and a photograph of Victoria in a hard hat pointing at something. It was a Tuesday morning information session in the Foundation's community room, attended by 23 families, 14 of them referred by schools in lower-income districts, 6 from Grief Counselor Network's 3, who had found the program through a single post on a community Facebook group that somehow got shared 400 times. Ethan stood at the front of the room in a button-down shirt, dark blue, the same one, and talked for 12 minutes about what the program was and what it was not. He talked about his daughter. He talked about what it felt like to watch a child carry grief with no language for it. He talked about sitting on a floor. He did not mention Victoria. He did not mention the gala. He just talked like a person who had lived through something and wanted to hand something useful across to other people who were living through something similar. When he finished, a woman in the second row raised her hand. She was maybe 40. She had a boy with her, maybe 7, who had been sitting very still with his arms crossed. The whole time, the posture Ethan recognized immediately, the body language of a child who had decided that stillness was safer than anything else. "My son hasn't talked in 4 months, the woman said. "Not since his dad left. The school says he might need to be tested for selective mutism. The specialist we were referred to has a 6-month wait." Her voice was steady, but her hands were not. Is this program for kids like him? Ethan looked at the boy. The boy looked back. Something in the look was familiar. Not specific, not Lena, not Maya. Just the particular shape of a child who had gone somewhere internal and was watching the world from behind a wall to see if it was worth coming back out for. Yeah, Ethan said. This program is exactly for kids like him. He looked at the mother. What's his name? Daniel, she said. Ethan looked at Daniel. Hey, Daniel? Daniel said nothing. Ethan nodded, like this was completely acceptable. I'm going to grab some water. You want anything? Daniel stared at him. Then after a long pause, he shook his head. Small, barely perceptible, but real. His mother's breath caught. In the back of the room, Victoria watched. She had come without announcing it, sitting in the last row with her coat still on, not as the foundation's CEO, but as someone who needed to see this. Who needed to see what it looked like when the thing she had funded and built and believed in was actually working. What she saw was Ethan Miller doing what Ethan Miller did. He moved on. He didn't make the headshake into a moment. He got his water, came back, and kept talking to the group. But 3 minutes later, he sat down in the empty chair next to Daniel, not at the front of the room, just sideways into the empty seat, like it was the most natural thing in the world, and kept talking to the whole room from there. 2 feet from a 7-year-old who hadn't spoken in 4 months. By the end of the session, Daniel was drawing on the back of the program handout. Nobody had asked him to. He had just started. His mother looked at the drawing and looked at Ethan and pressed her hand over her mouth, and the gesture was so familiar that Victoria had to look away. She found Ethan afterward in the corridor. You sat down next to him, she said. I noticed the chair was empty. Ethan. He needed someone close without it being a thing, he said. So I made it not a thing. She looked at him. It's what you did, she said. At the gala. The empty floor next to Lena. He was quiet. You do it instinctively, she said. You don't strategize it. You just read where someone is and you go to that spot. He shifted slightly. Not uncomfortable. Just private about it the way he was private about anything that might sound like a compliment if said out loud. The program needs a parent support component, he said. The mother tonight, she's been holding this alone for 4 months. The kid isn't the only one who needs somewhere to go. Already in the budget, she said. I added it last week. He looked at her. I've been listening, she said. I take notes. He smiled. A real one, full enough that it reached his eyes. She had been cataloging his smiles without intending to the way you cataloged things that were rare and therefore valuable. Lena's waiting in the car, she said. She wanted to come in, but I told her to give it 10 minutes. That was 30 minutes ago. He glanced toward the exit. She's been in the car for 30 minutes. She's fine. She has her sketchbook. A pause. She drew a picture of this building last week. She called it the place where Ethan fixed things. He looked at Victoria. I told her you didn't fix things, Victoria said. You stayed for them. She said that's the same thing. He was quiet for a moment. She's not wrong. She's frequently not wrong. It's becoming a pattern. He laughed. They walked out together. Lena was indeed in the car with her sketchbook, and when she saw them, she pressed it against the window so Ethan could see what she was drawing. He stopped on the sidewalk and leaned forward and looked at it. She had drawn 2 figures, one tall, one small, standing outside a building. Under the drawing in careful block letters, she had written, "He stays." He looked at the drawing for a long moment. Then he held up both thumbs. Lena looked enormously satisfied with herself. In May, the lawsuit became public. Ethan had chosen the fuller route, not just a settlement, but a testimony documentation, a public filing that attached his name and Sarah's name to a case that now included 7 families and a federal investigation into the manufacturer's safety suppression practices. Castellano had warned him it would generate attention. He had understood. He had prepared Maya as well as he knew how. He had not fully prepared for what actually happened. The story ran in 3 major outlets on a Thursday. By Friday, it had been picked up nationally. By Saturday, Ethan's phone had 83 messages from people he didn't know. Some were from journalists. Some were from other families with similar stories. And some, a significant number, were from people who had lost someone and who had read the article and who had something very simple to say. Thank you. He read every message. He didn't respond to all of them, but he read them. One came on Saturday afternoon from an unknown number with a 312 area code. It said, "Daniel talked this morning. He asked for pancakes. Maria." He sat down on his couch when he read that one. He sat down, and he read it 3 more times, and then he put the phone face down on the cushion beside him, and put his hands over his face, and let himself feel the full weight of it. The lawsuit and Sarah and the 7 families and the program and Daniel and the 23 families from the Tuesday session, and Lena's drawing pressed against a car window, all of it arriving at once, which was how things like this arrived when you'd been holding them at a careful distance for a long time. Maya appeared from his kitchen. She looked at him sitting there with his hands over his face. "Dad?" She came and sat beside him. "What happened?" He took his hands down, picked up the phone, showed her Maria's message. She read it. She handed the phone back. Then she leaned against his shoulder the way she used to when she was very young, before grief had taught both of them to take up less space, and she stayed there. He put his arm around her. They sat. The second Tuesday of June. Ethan arrived at the Whitmore house to find Lena not at the kitchen table, but in the front hallway. She was wearing her school backpack, which she had not yet taken off, and her expression was the specific one she wore when she had decided something important and was about to announce it. "I want to volunteer," she said, "at the program, on Saturdays." Ethan stopped. "I'm 10 now," she said, as though this had been the primary obstacle. "I can help with the little kids. I know how to sit with them." He looked at her. "Lena," he said, "you've been volunteering since September. You just didn't have a title." She blinked. Then, "I want a title." "What title?" She thought about it seriously. "Junior sitting expert." He managed to keep his face straight for approximately 2 seconds. "That is not going on a business card." "Why not?" "Because it's deeply undignified." "You sat on a floor at a fancy party," she said. "You don't get to talk about dignity." He lost the battle with his face. She grinned. It was a full, open, completely unguarded grin, the kind of grin that 14 months ago had not existed in this house. The kind of grin that Victoria sometimes caught a glimpse of from the doorway, and then had to turn away from, because it was too good and too much and too precious to look at directly. "I'll talk to the team," he said. "Saturday program, official capacity. We'll figure out a title that doesn't embarrass both of us." "Junior Resilience Specialist," she said immediately. He stared at her. "You had that ready." "I've been thinking about it since February." "Lena, is that a yes?" He looked at the 10-year-old in the hallway with her backpack still on, and her father's watch visible under her sleeve, because she wore it every day now, and he thought about the first time he had seen her cornered and screaming and completely alone in a circle of people who didn't know how to reach her. "Yeah," he said. "That's a yes." She pumped her fist. Victoria appeared from the kitchen doorway. She had clearly heard all of it. Her expression was doing the thing it did. Now the open, unmanaged thing that had replaced the iron composure, not weakness, just honesty, the face of a woman who had learned that feelings were not liabilities. "Junior Resilience Specialist," she said. "I'm having that put on a card." "Mom, real card. Good paper, the embossed kind." "Oh my God," Lena said. She disappeared upstairs, backpack still on, probably to call Maya with the news. Victoria and Ethan stood in the hallway. "She's been planning that since February," he said. "I know. She told me in March. I've been waiting." He shook his head slowly. "She played us both. She's her father's daughter," Victoria said. A pause. "James was the best strategic thinker I ever met. He just wrapped it in sandwich making so nobody noticed." Her voice was warm when she said it. Easy. The way grief felt after enough time had passed, still present, always present, but no longer razor-edged. Changed into something that could be held. "Good combination," Ethan said. "Yeah." She moved back toward the kitchen. "Coffee." "Always." They went to the kitchen and she made coffee, and he sat at the counter, and upstairs they could hear Lena on the phone, probably. Maya definitely laughing about something, and the house was warm and real and full of sound, which was such a different thing from what it had been 14 months ago, that sometimes Victoria stood in the middle of it and had to just stop and be inside the fact of it. She set Ethan's mug in front of him. He wrapped both hands around it. "Thank you," he said, "for the program, for Castellano, for the board thing." He looked at her. "For all of it." "You built the program," she said. "I just cleared the road." That mattered. "I know." She sat down across from him. Not the negotiating distance of 3 months ago. Close. The kitchen table distance of people who had talked their way to something real. "Ethan, can I say something without you deflecting?" "Probably not," he said. "But try." She looked at him. "I would like Maya and Lena to grow up knowing each other. Not just as texting friends. As family adjacent." She held his gaze. "I don't have a word for what that looks like exactly. I just know that whatever it is, I would like it to be real and lasting and on purpose." He was quiet. "I'm not in a hurry," she said. "I'm not proposing anything. I'm just naming something that I think is already true, and that I would like us both to stop pretending isn't." He looked at her for a long time. Then he picked up his coffee. "Family adjacent," he said. "I know it's not elegant." "No, He set the mug down. "I think that might be exactly the right word, actually. Adjacent. Because it's not replacing anything. It's not trying to be what things were. It's just beside." He met her eyes. "I can do beside." "So can I," she said. "I'm learning." Upstairs, Lena was still laughing at something Maya had said. Down in the kitchen, two people who had both lost the thing they built their lives around sat across from each other with their coffee, and the sound of a child's laughter overhead, and everything that was still uncertain, and everything that had already quietly become certain, and made no move to rush any of it. Because they had both learned the hard way that the things worth having did not need to be forced. They only needed someone willing to stay long enough to let them grow. Months later. The October following, almost exactly 1 year after a man in a gray uniform sat down on a marble floor, the Whitmore Foundation held its annual charity event. Ethan was not cleaning the floors. He was standing near the entrance, talking to a father he recognized from the Tuesday program, a man named Robert, whose twin daughters had started drawing again after 4 months of silence following their mother's cancer diagnosis. I was listening in the way he always listened, completely, without looking at his phone, without scanning the room, just fully there, when he felt someone take his hand. He looked down. Lena. She had grown 2 inches since September, and she was wearing a dress that she had chosen herself, and she was holding his hand with the calm confidence of someone who had decided that this was what people did when they found their way back to the world. "There's a little kid over there crying," she said quietly. By the chairs near the door, his mom looked scared. He followed her gaze. She was right. A boy, maybe 6. A woman beside him, who had the wide-eyed look of someone in a public situation with a child in crisis, who did not know what to do. He looked at Lena. She looked at him. "Should we?" she said. He squeezed her hand. "Yeah," he said. "We should." They walked toward the boy together. When they got close enough, Lena did something that Ethan had not coached or suggested or taught her directly. She sat down on the floor next to the boy's chair. Just sat down. Right there. The boy looked at her. She looked at him. "I used to do this too," she said. "Cry at the fancy parties. It's actually pretty reasonable if you think about it." The boy stared at her. Then very slowly he sat down beside her. Ethan stayed where he was, slightly back, because she didn't need him in this moment. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was doing it herself with her father's watch on her wrist, and her own particular brand of hard-won courage, and the knowledge built slowly and painfully and real that the best thing one person could offer another was not a solution, but a presence. Across the room, Victoria had seen it. She stood completely still and watched her 10-year-old daughter sit on the floor of the Whitmore Foundation charity gala and hold space for a child she had never met. Margaret appeared at her shoulder, said nothing, just handed her a tissue. Victoria took it. She pressed it briefly to her eyes. Then she straightened, exhaled, looked across the room at Ethan, who was watching Lena with the expression of someone seeing a thing they didn't know they'd been building toward. She caught his eye. He looked at her. She nodded once. He nodded back. And in the center of the room, Lena Whitmore, who had once been described as the girl everyone had given up on, who had screamed and thrown things and pushed away every person who came close, who had asked a man in a gray uniform whether promises could break, sat on the floor next to a crying child, and was exactly what someone had once been for her. She stayed. She proved, without knowing she was proving it, the only thing that had ever really mattered. That healing was not something that happened to you. It was something you chose to pass forward, one floor at a time, one person at a time, one stayed moment at a time, until the love that held you together became the same love you offered out, and the circle quietly, permanently closed.